My name is David Ulbrich, and this is September 9th, 2007. What is your full name, sir?
George W. Cook, Jr.
And when and where were you born?
Asbury, in 1920, October 11th, in Asbury Park, New Jersey.
And what squadron were you attached to?
514th.
When did you join the military?
Well, at the Pearl Harbor, December the 7th, I, like a lot of other people, went down and enlisted. I went to the post office in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and I thought at the time I wanted to join the Navy. Until the time that they said the enlistment is for 6 years, and I says, whoa. I went next door to the Army Air Corps, and they said the duration plus 6 months. January the 16th, I was inducted into the service of 42.
Wow, so this was a sort of a patriotic reaction.
Well, sort of, yeah.
And then, were you worried about maybe getting drafted and not having a choice?
Well, I was never signed up for the draft. I was 21 at the time, but I had never, been required to do that.
All right. Just a little bit about the pre-war years. Looking back on the years of the Great Depression, do you think, what was your life like during the Great Depression?
Well, we went through that. My family was poor. And when the banks closed, they lost everything that they had. I remember having a bank account in the school, and we lost all of that too as, children, school children. And so we had a struggle getting through the Depression. It was kind of tough.
Do you think that this experience strengthened you or toughened you for World War II?
Well, it very well could have, sure, yeah.
And so you were, you must have been, what, 20 years old? Or no, 21 years old when you...
When I went into the service, I was 21, yeah.
And what were you doing at the time before, what were you doing for a living?
I was working at a bakery in Asbury Park. Bakery.
All right. So how did you end up in the grounds crew in the Army Air Corps? Once you enlisted, they would have run you through that.
Yeah.
Tell me about it,
Okay.
please.
Right after I was inducted, of course, I went for basic training for 4 weeks at Fort Dix, sleeping in a tent in the winter with a pot-belly stove burning wood, colder than a big good, in the wintertime, January. And from there, after basic training, I was sent to Langley Field, Virginia.
All right.
And I was assigned to a P-40 outfit. And we had the training with the line chief and the techniques, the technical manuals is what taught us how to work on these planes. Well, we went from Langley Field to Bradley Field in Massachusetts. And there the pilots were learning how to fly these fast P-40s. And after they become proficient at that, we went up to Quonset Point, Rhode Island. That was a naval base. And the pilots practiced taking off at a measured distance. And after they got proficient at that, we taxied our P-40s over to the ramp of the aircraft carrier Ranger. And the Navy crews took the planes and put them into the carrier. Then the pilots and the planes took off for North Africa. And when they got to the west coast of Africa, they flew the planes off of the carrier, and they ended up in Palestine, at Lydda Airport in Palestine. There had been a few of the crews had been flown over to meet the pilots in the planes when they got there in the Lydda Airport in Palestine. The remainder of the squadron was put on a boat up at New York, the Louis Pasteur, which was a French luxury liner that the British had taken away from the British, made it a troop carrier, 500 troops on this thing. And we're leaving out of New York Harbor, and we're not out of sight of New York Harbor, and a 25 comes over and starts dropping depth bombs around us. So we never seen the sub come up, but anyhow, we had a PBY boat, flying boat, for 3 days after that, and after that it was a zigzag, zigzag, zigzag the whole way over to West Africa, where they refueled at Freetown.
Were you in a convoy?
No,
or
we
you
were all alone.
All alone. All
All
right.
alone, yeah. And they zigzagged, every so often, zing, 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 zing. So to, avoid the subs if they could. But anyhow,
Just one quick question. The P-40, that is, just for clarification, that's a single-engine fighter aircraft.
that's correct.
All right. Very
Yes.
good. Back to the zigzagging.
Okay. So they refueled over at Freetown, and from there we went down to Durban, South Africa, where we got off the boat for 2 days and got some good food for a change, because we were eating limey rations on that damn boat. So anyhow, we after Durban, where we went through the Strait of Madagascar, round through the Red Sea, and up to the south end of the Suez Canal at Port Tufik.
That must have been a really long voyage.
It was 30 days on that boat, 30 days.
And you wanted to join the Navy.
Yeah. But, I said the Navy wanted to sign up for 6 years. Did I mention that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
You were cured, right?
Yeah, I sure was. But anyhow, we were driven by so-called trains, Egyptian planes, or trains, up to Palestine for 3 days. We were on that damn train. And we ended up in Lydda. And when we arrived at Lydda Airport, well, there was a crew there from Halpro, called Halpro, which was scheduled to go over, a B-24 outfit, which was scheduled to go over and bomb Tokyo, and then come back and refuel at an airfield in China. But before this could happen, the Japs captured that airfield, so the mission was canceled. So they had come over with a skeleton crew, and they put out a call for mechanics, and I got shipped from my P-40 outfit into the B-24 outfit.
And HALPRO stands for the Halverson Project,
That's
named
right.
after Lieutenant Colonel Halverson, who was
Right.
the commanding officer.
That was it.
Very good. Just wanted to for clarification.
Yeah, right. So I got transferred to the B-24 outfit, and I was in a refueling team for a while. Then I got put into Ted Kramer's crew chief of the B-24, number 62, called Patches. That was the name painted on the side of the trip, on the ship. And I was with that crew for quite some time. That's this picture here.
You're going to put it up, hold it. There we go. We're going to get it focused in. And you are the second from the left, the second man from the left. The second man from the left. So you see Patches there, and that was the grounds crew, the four-man grounds crew.
That's right. Yeah.
And you were the supervisor for that crew?
No. The crew chief was Ted Kramer. And he's the guy on the. Well, I'd have to look at it to see.
Sure.
Okay.
That's fine.
Ted Kramer is the guy on the left.
On the left.
Over here on the left.
Very good.
It was from Brooklyn.
Very good. That's a great photo.
Okay. All through with that?
Yes. Being on this crew, you maintained the one aircraft at a time, correct?
Yes.
You had your hands full, no doubt.
That was our plane right there, Patches.
And what was your typical? Well, if there was a typical, what was your work day like? You must have been working 18 hours a day.
We had to have the plane ready for a mission whenever they decided having a mission. And the crew chief, when he signed that paper saying this plane is ready to fly, it better be ready to fly, because he signs his name for that. So, when they came back and, shot up, and we'd have to get them ready for the next day of the missions. And never forgotten the first guy that I seen come back that had killed on a mission. When they were taking him off the plane, you know, and on a stretcher, and we had to go in and clean the blood up all over the plane. You know, that was all inside the plane. But that stuck with me all these years. I can never forget that guy.
I'm sure.
But anyhow, later on, I became a crew chief on another plane, number 69. I had 3 guys in my crew, beside myself. So there was 4 of us, and what we did is we were following the British 8th Army all the way across North Africa, you know, chasing the Germans and the Italian troops. And
From Egypt sort of westward towards Tunisia.
right, Egypt, Palestine, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, and then Italy. So we crossed 2 deserts, the Sinai and the Sahara Desert, and we had a lot of dust storms and rain also.
Yes.
This was our hotel.
Your hotel.
Our hotel, all across North Africa.
See a number 39 written on there. Is that, or 34 or 39? That was your, and all 4 of you slept in that?
It was a 4-man tent, yeah. Dug in the ground.
That is a great photo. We're good with that.
You got it?
Yes.
Of course, I don't know if you want that one, where I'm on a 1,000-pound bomb.
Yeah. That gives a really good idea of how big a 1,000-pound bomb really was.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
a sizable piece of armament. Ordnance, rather. Sizable piece of ordnance. You've got it.
Okay. So let's see, we're up to Tunisia. Oh no, we were at Benghazi when they did this raid, the low-level bombing to the Romanian oil fields.
Ploeshti.
Ploeshti, right? Yeah, we were at Benghazi when that happened. So we continued on across to Tunisia, then finally over to Italy, and we ended up at an airfield in the southern part of Italy called San Pancrazio. San Pancrazio. And we were there, and at some time, I think it was May of '44, I was selected to come home on rotation. So we were sent to a replacement depot just outside of Naples that was at Mussolini's racetrack, the stadium. And that's where we were. And it seemed like every cloudy evening while the Germans would come over and to bomb the harbor there in Naples. We were just outside of Naples. And of course, the skies would be lit up with all these tracers going up and the camera, the lights to spot these here German fighters. And I never did see them shoot one down, but they had them in the light out there. But anyhow, all that stuff that goes up has got to come down, so we would all run and get under the stadium because of that shrapnel coming down, you know. So I got onto a Liberty boat. It was to come home from Naples. 500 of us, the troops on this here Liberty troop carrier. And we were 24 days coming home from Italy. And I tell you, that Statue of Liberty really looked great when we got into New York Harbor.
I'm sure.
And so from there, I was had my 2 weeks at home. Then I got shipped down to Florida into Eglin Field, an auxiliary field. And we had AT-6s, that was a trainer type plane, that we had production line maintenance on that thing, day in and day out. We had a quota every day, and out on the hot concrete aprons, you know, and hotter in the dead blazes. So that's where I spent my remaining time in the service till the war ended. And I donated 3 years and 8 months of my time to Uncle Sam. In exchange for that, he took me on a tour of the Middle East, Palestine, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia. And I did get one day into Jerusalem. And that was my service.
Sure, sure. Can I ask you some specific questions about the grounds crew,
Sure.
your activities?
Yeah.
Your overview really allows me to ask some specific questions, and whoever's watching this will have the context, the big picture. How did you interact with the flight crews that flew your aircraft?
Very closely. I mean, you're making sure that that plane is safe to fly in, and they're depending on you to have that plane ready for them.
Sure.
And they were really, appreciative. And we were appreciative, of course, what they were doing. They were risking their lives.
Sure, sure. But then again, they did their 50 missions, which could be in as short as 3 or 4 months, and
Yes.
they went home. And
Yes.
You were.
I was
you
there
were
for 22 months overseas.
Yes, yes. What were some of the worst problems that you faced in maintaining and repairing the aircraft? Did you have enough spare parts coming in, or did you have to cannibalize?
Well, they did some of that cannibalizing. Of course, a plane that was shot up enough, why they had parts from that. That you couldn't be flying anymore. But, well, each one of us had an engine, and that was your engine to take care of, And we had to make sure that the oil was cleaned off it. After they come back on mission, they'd be covered with oil, And what we did is, along our way, most of us had these accumulators, like a hydraulic piston, We took them off of Italian planes, and we'd suck up some 100-octane gasoline and squirt that engine and get all that oil off the engines that way. That's why we clean them up. And also, our coveralls, we just dip them in 100-octane gasoline and hang them on a prop, and they dry right out. That's why we washed our clothes over there.
Oh, wow. So this was Italian fuel, you said?
It was an accumulator from Italian airplane.
All right,
Yeah,
all right.
a hydraulic type plane, and you could suck up the gasoline into it and squirt it out,
All right, all right. Very good, very good. So you use spare parts, but I guess my other question about the spare parts was let me rephrase this. Was the American logistics or the Allies' logistics system good enough, especially early on in North Africa, to get you the spare parts and the new parts when you needed them? Maybe not every day, but in general,
Yeah.
did you get the spare parts on time?
Well, I can't recall that,
All right.
We,
Well-
I know a lot of times we'd take a trip into Cairo and get spare parts there.
All right.
And
All right, but well,
And-
it seems to me that if it was really bad, it probably would resonate. It probably would have clicked in you. So they
our
probably,
gasoline was delivered in 50-gallon drums, and we'd have to suck that out and get into the tanker, to put the fuel into the airplanes.
sure, sure. In terms of the weather conditions, that must have wreaked havoc on the engines.
Oh, they did. Those
sand.
dust storms was flying just like flour, and it got in everything. You wore your goggles and you had a mask on. It got into everything, and we covered the engines. We had a covers for the engines, canvas covers we put over that to keep the dust from getting into those. But that dust got into every damn thing.
Probably corroded stuff.
Yeah.
And I was talking with one of your fellow grounds crewmen from the 376, and he said that an engine might have 100 hours in it before it had to be switched out. That's aside from battle damage or flak or
right,
whatever.
yeah.
100 hours, which could be 10 missions or 8 missions.
Sure. Yeah.
And so you must have been changing engines all the time.
Most of the time.
How long did it take to
Well,
switch
we
out?
sent a replacement engine replacement group that would replace the engines.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, so you'd
They're
have a special
specialized.
group,
Yeah,
with a winch or some sort of thing to get the thing off and then put the new engine
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
All right, all right. What was the, how did you handle the battle damage, whether it's from enemy aircraft fire or the German flak? What was how
Well-
did you fix things?
We had people who patched up the bigger holes with the aluminum stuff. Now, the little holes, they just left the little holes because there weren't pressurized cabins, They when they got up to 10,000 feet, they were on oxygen. So the smaller holes didn't matter. But the bigger holes and the real damage, they had people that took care of the medalists, sheet medalists, that took care of all that.
Right, and from what I've heard, sometimes the bomb bay doors would freeze shut and they drop the bombs through the bomb bay doors, so I bet you're changing out, replacing a lot of bomb bay doors.
Yeah, I don't recall any of our bomb bays having that
All right.
reaction. I do remember seeing some bombs that got hung up that didn't release, and when they hit the ground, that bomb would skid along that groundway and everyone would scatter. Of course, you didn't know if it was going to go off or not.
Well, yeah. And of course, scattering, if it's a 1,000-pound bomb, you really can't get out of the way. Scattering is just more for your...
But that bomb would skid right down that runway.
Sure. In terms of the types of problems that you had to deal with, do you recall if it was, aside from battle damage, which would just mess up everything, did you have problems with hydraulics or structural problems or mechanical problems, or was the B-24 a pretty solid aircraft overall, assuming it wasn't damaged?
That was a pretty good plane. The B-24 was a very good plane, sturdy. They come back with some awfully damage. You wouldn't know how they could even fly, but they came back with some terrific damage, and they made it back.
And I understand the engines were big, powerful engines.
Yeah, they were, yeah.
And, the plane could actually fly on 2 engines.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
And this plane is what, 80,000 pounds or something.
It was heavy.
It is very heavy, and it could still fly. What about some, any mechanical or structural problems? What was the most common thing you had to deal with? Common problem or common?
I think replacing the plugs, spark plugs and things of that sort. That was, of course, you have a certain procedure to do for each inspection, 50-hour, 100-hour and 300-hour inspections. And I guess replacing the plugs was most of the time.
All right. And then...
and, of course, making sure the oil level and all that was correct in the plane.
Sure.
The gasoline.
And then the armament personnel dealt with the bombs and with the machine guns and that sort of thing, so you were not concerned.
No, we weren't concerned with that. No, they took care of that, the armaments. Yeah.
Very good. Would you be working all night sometimes to get the plane ready to go?
Yeah, on occasion, yeah.
So you work all night, you watch the plane take off at 6, 7 a.m. in the morning, something like that. It's gone 6, 8, 10, 12 hours. And is that when you're going to get a little sleep there so you can be ready for it when it comes back in?
Sure. Yeah.
So
when they were on a mission, that's what we did. Yeah.
So it's sort of like working third shift. Second shift or third shift.
Yeah.
Not that you had a whole lot of free time, but what did you do for entertainment or for fun when you did have a little free time?
Well, I had a German Mauser Model 98, which I wasn't supposed to have. I had to have it hidden all the time I was in the of course, they took the guns away from us. But I'd be out in the desert shooting this thing at different things, whatever. And I got pretty good with that there Model 98 German. And of course, at one time I had close to 5,000 rounds of their German ammo in my tent. Of course, you go right along the roadways and there'd be the piles of ammo all lined up. You need to take whatever you needed.
So you did a little target shooting on the side.
Yep.
Yeah, that's.
And I was assigned a 45, of course, but I got pretty proficient with that 45 also.
Well, you had some time on your hands.
Yep.
Interesting. Did you have occasion, or did you talk with other grounds crew? How did the B-24 compare with the B-17 in terms of maintenance? Do you have any recollection of that?
Well, I never spoke to anyone in the 17, but we always considered the 24 the superior plane because it could fly further, could carry a heavier load, and was faster. So we always thought the B-17 was not the plane.
Sure.
24 was it.
Sure. Did you, you know, did you, can you tell me, an amusing story or funny episode? What was the, maybe with your, you know, your fellow grounds crewmen, or, you know, can you relate some amusing story? Something that we wouldn't read about in the history books.
Yeah.
Or we wouldn't read about if we read a, you know, a log book that you were keeping on repairs.
Yeah. I can't recall anything like that. I know that eventually when we started getting some American rations, which would be a can of beer every so often and some cigarettes, why, in order to cool the beer, we'd put it in a bucket of some 100-octane gasoline, and the evaporation of the gasoline would cool the beer.
There you go.
Yeah.
That does it.
Yep.
The evaporation of the gasoline cooled the beer.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Well, you're not going to find any place else to cool the beer in
That's right.
North Africa.
The Mediterranean was warm. You know, you never got refreshed by. Our tents were right along the street, the beachfront there in Benghazi, and you go swimming whenever you know, it was off, and it wasn't refreshing at all. It was warm.
Did you ever worry about the Germans bombing your base?
Oh,
Was
sure.
there air raids?
Yeah. Yeah, we all had our foxholes right outside our dug-in tents.
Did the Germans ever
Well,
attack?
When we were in, let's say, I guess it was Benghazi, yes. The Italians had dropped some paratroopers, and they were going to come and sabotage the planes. But before they got to do this, I think they did get one field. I think they did get a plane or two. But anyhow, the Arabs tipped off the British, and the British rounded up all these Italian commandos. So, but at the time when this was taking place, we had a guy at the front and at the tail end of this plane with a gun, and all night long we were there protecting that plane until this, you know.
So there's a little extra guard duty that's not necessarily on your.
That's right.
On your MOS or whatever.
That's right.
But you know, you didn't want to let anybody mess with your plane once you fixed it. You had a vested interest in that,
Yeah,
right?
right. Yeah,
Vested
that
interest
was
in
quite an evening.
I'm sure. Did you have occasion to write letters home very often, or
Oh, yes.
receive letters
Oh,
from
sure.
home?
Yeah, you always look for mail from home. Yeah.
That was the
Mail
big
call.
morale out there, the big
Mail
morale
call.
boost, right?
Yep, mail call was a big time. Yep.
Who did you write, or who
I
wrote?
just wrote to my parents at home. That's it.
And obviously there was a censor, but did you?
Oh, yeah. They
What
cut-
sort of thing?
They cut out stuff in the letters, you know, with a razor blade and stuff like that they didn't want seen sent. You weren't able to say where you were.
Right.
You could say somewheres in the Middle East of that sort, but
Yeah.
or else you couldn't say anything about where you were.
But you would have, you know, the thing that strikes me, having read some of these letters, is that they, you know, to someone like me who's, you know, living in 2007, 36 years old, they often seem very mundane. The weather, it's the flowers, it's, you know, the dog had puppies. But that sort of thing is great for your morale because
Oh,
it
sure.
reminds you that there is a home.
Yep.
And it
yep.
didn't matter what was being said, it was just the
that's
idea
right. Yep.
that someone was writing to you.
Yeah. Yeah, mail call was a big time. Boy, you always look forward to mail call.
About how long did it take the letters, or can you guess, do you know, it was a month or 6 weeks or something?
I don't know.
Or I mean,
It was, I'm sure it was a couple months for, you know, some of them to get there.
yeah. And did you write often home then?
Yeah.
Very good.
Yes.
Very good. I mean, and the other thing is those sorts of letters, it's all part of trying to put together a whole picture. We've got the official documents that are kind of dry, descriptive but dry, and then we had these interviews, and you had those letters, and we're able to, and the photos, we're able to piece together a colorful, reconstruct a colorful picture of the past. So this is very valuable. Where were you or did it come as a surprise, or where were you, and did it come as a surprise when VE Day was celebrated, May 7th, 1945? Were you surprised? I mean,
Well,
relieved?
no,
but-
we were kind of hoping it would, end pretty soon. It happened. It was all over in Europe, and then we were waiting for it to happen in Japan,
I think,
And it really, that was the bombs that did the job over there in Japan. Atom bombs.
from what I understand from your fellow veterans, Victory in Europe Day, May 7th, was coming sooner or later. However,
Yeah.
August 1945 was a surprise.
Yeah.
The bombs were a surprise, and that it was over fairly quickly.
Yes,
Once
yeah.
the bombs were dropped, that was a surprise
Yeah.
and a relief,
Sure was. Yep.
because they were massing millions of men and thousands of aircraft to go in.
And then that would have been an awful loss of life.
Yes, yes, no doubt about it. Well, we're coming to the end here of my questions. Is there anything you'd like to add? This is sort of your open forum to make any sort of a statement, if you wish. Any ideas? Anything that as we were going along, you say, "Oh, I wanted to talk about that." Anything you want to add?
No, I already mentioned about Uncle Sam taking me on a tour, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So that was about the only thing that I would, consider saying.
So you wanted to join the Navy, but then you got cured after going around the Cape of Good Hope or whatever around Africa, and then you ended up spending most of your war years either in the heat of North Africa
Yep.
or in the heat of Florida.
Yes.
At least the heat of North Africa would have been
If I could have got out of Florida and gone back, I'd have gone back, really.
well with the humidity.
Yeah, with my group, yeah.
Yeah, very good, very
Yep.
good. Well, that's wonderful stories. So
Well,
if there's anything else.
No, I think we've covered pretty much everything there is.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time. It's
Well-
been a pleasure and honor, sir.
Oh, thank you, sir.